Hey, how like
Ooh,
a wolf and a witch will open the door to Friday night. Hello, metal YouTubers. How is it all going? Alan, hello.
hey,
Again,
Marty.
we're back.
That we are.
Number 39. We're getting close to the big 5-0. That seems like some sort of a anniversary of some sort.
Could be. Don't know. But how's things going tonight?
Going good. Going good. I'm pretty psyched. We've got a special guest tonight.
Hmm.
Melanie from Melanie Loves Death Metal YouTube channel. We've been trying since around Christmas time, but of course, we knew going into December that family stuff and holidays and was going to be hard to exactly fester it off. No presents for Christmas. It would be tough to get some folks, and just been busy, but the planets aligned, and Melanie's with us, and we are gathered here tonight to lay to rest. Well, not laying to rest. We are going to discuss, dissect, and rank the the solo legacy of one Kim Bendix Peterson, better known the world over as King Diamond. And to do that, to help us tonight, is Melanie from Melanie Loves Death Metal. How's it going, Melanie?
Hey guys, pretty good. I'm excited for this.
Thank you so much for
Love,
joining us.
yeah, for sure.
And really, this is a long overdue. Actually, this is kind of a long overdue thing for us, Alan. I mean, really.
Kind of is. Yeah, it's a little surprising this hasn't come up before, but when we asked Melanie what she'd like to talk about, she listed a couple of bands where she'd like to kind of, go deep into their discography, and this one floated to the surface pretty fast. It was kind of like, oh, yeah, what she said. That's smart.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, these albums are no stranger to my channel, or your channel, or this very show. I mean, constantly. Oh, look at there. Melanie is greater than King Diamond. Hey, Ben. There's another guy we need to get on here soon,
Yeah.
but his schedules are a bunch of crap. And his internet's a bunch of crap.
I
But
was
we'll
just gonna
get
say,
you.
doesn't he have to use his phone for the internet?
Yeah, he's got gerbils and coconuts and bamboo kind of system from Gilligan's Island for internet. I don't know what's up
So,
with that,
but
but
it took
Ben's
like
day will come. We'll get him on here one way or the other.
it took 3 minutes, and finally somebody's screaming "grandma" in the chat. So.
oh no, my least favorite lyrical line in almost every King Diamond album. Oh no.
It's always there too.
But for anybody that is not aware, Melanie Loves Death Metal is a recent-ish channel on the YouTubeverse, and it's very cool. She focuses a lot on death metal, of course, hence the name, but there are other metal styles as well. I know she does Black Metal Mondays, and you'll probably be seeing some other things that interest her down the road as well. But what inspired you, Melanie, to start down this dark path? Shout out to Matt. Shout out to Matt.
So I pretty much obviously Ken's death metal group was a big inspiration of mine to start doing something similar to this. There was another YouTuber, he goes by The Motley Crew Forever. His name is Nick. He does mostly black metal now, but he started doing collection updates 5 years ago, around the time that I started really getting into collecting vinyl and really digging further into black metal and death metal. So those two were probably the first two YouTubers that I ever watched that would show off their collections and talk about what they got. And when I started really getting into it more within the last couple of years, actually my wife was like, you should do that. I'm sure you probably could get a pretty good following. You should start posting your collection, because I have a pretty large collection of vinyl now, and now my tape collection is just getting out of hand. So I started doing it on Instagram and got a lot of followers on there. It actually grew a lot faster than I anticipated. And then when COVID hit, I became a remote worker. I was just working from home, and I got bored. And so I just turned on my cell phone one day and started recording a collection that I had, like a bunch of stuff that I just got in the mail, and I uploaded it. And I think like 2 days later, I had 10 subscribers already. So it just was kind of crazy. I didn't expect it to grow into what it has now. And it hasn't even been a year yet. I think it'll be April when it's a year. So it's simply boredom. That's pretty much what started all of this.
Yeah, I thought you were coming up close to your 1 year anniversary, and yeah, you've done really great with your channel. Folks always very enthusiastic about and excited about stuff you post, and with good reason.
Yep.
You do a good
I
job
told
with
myself, when I got 1,000 subscribers, I would try a little bit more, get off my cell phone, get an actual microphone, and maybe edit a little bit. Although the editing is not something that I typically like doing a whole lot. So I still try to keep it a little bit simple, but maybe someday we'll get to that point. But for now, it's just for fun. It's just a hobby that I'm doing. So
Editing is nice, but I have a computer that can't do it, so I kind of just have to wing it. That's just got to go for it.
I just don't have patience to do it. That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Did you find it weird when you first set up the cam? I mean, that was for probably the first 10. I'm staring at this camera, the phone, going, "What am I doing?
Yeah.
What
I
the
think
fuck am I doing?"
the first couple of videos I did it in portrait mode, so the video's got like the black bars and everything,
Oh
like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty much like what you would see on Instagram or
Yep.
something.
Mhm.
And I uploaded, I think the quality's awful, like you can barely hear me. And then I started doing it in the landscape, and I went back and forth between my laptop camera and my iPad and my phone for like several videos before I finally just settled on doing it through my phone, up until about 1,000 subscribers. So it was always weird. And I was embarrassed, so I would wait till like nobody was home. Like it just felt weird. I didn't tell anybody in my family that I was doing it.
Yep. The dark secret. Yes.
Yeah.
Melanie, are you hiding a YouTube channel under your bed?
Yep. But you pulled up a good one for us. For me personally, I'll just jump in real quick. King Diamond and Merciful Fate are some amongst my favorite metal music of all time, hands down. I mean, you look at this catalog: 86, 87, 88, 89. 89 is the year I graduated high school. So I mean, this whole stretch of albums is all my formative high school, senior high, junior high, late junior high, senior high years. And I spun the shit out of all of this stuff, whether it was Merciful Fate or King Diamond. I would monthly have at least 2 King Diamond Merciful Fate marathons. I'd start with Fate and I would just go through. As of course, as years went on, that started to become quite a long run of falsetto singing, because at some point Merciful Fate and King Diamond ran parallel to each other, as both bands were both alive at the same time and being quite productive at one point in time. But King Diamond is the project that prevailed, and the still to this day, there is nothing on here I absolutely hate. There's some I don't like all that much, but I can't say I hate it because the core elements are the same. But Melanie, where did you jump on with the King?
So I jumped on, I was pretty young, probably 9 or 10. So, I mean, I'm 37 now. So that explains, I was pretty far into King Diamond, had all the albums out already. And my brother, who's quite a bit older than I am, is a huge metalhead. The reason why I'm into it, was obsessed with Don't Break the Oath. That's like
Fuck
one
yeah.
of his all-time favorite albums, and would just play it all the time. And I remember hearing it and hating it because of the falsetto singing. And
I was the
just,
same way when I first started. I'm
yeah.
like, what is this crap?
And like it was interesting because I loved Iron Maiden, and Bruce Dickinson has that little bit of a higher tone of singing, but not in this vein. And as I got older and got into high school, I started digging further into the metal genre, going off of like Slipknot and Pantera and getting away from those bands and trying to evolve more into it. And I circled back to Merciful Fate. And I remember I went to a CD store that I used to go to all the time, and they had Melissa available. And I think I spent like $25 or something insane for the CD, now that I think about it. And I listened to it, and it grew on me, and then I got Don't Break the Oath, and then it just spawned into that. Like I was already obsessed with bands like Alice Cooper, the Corpse Paint stuff of like Behemoth, and Kiss was something that I always loved growing up. And so King Diamond had the face paint, and that was pretty much was like, okay, this is cool. Like and he was very portrayed as like an evil, scary guy in the media. I just remember seeing people like, oh, he's a Satanist, like he's evil, like that guy's the worst, and just kind of straying away from that when I was younger. And then in high school, I just didn't care anymore. So that's pretty much it. Evolved. It was a long evolution. But Ben, but yeah, I mean, as I got older, and started learning how to play guitar and playing music myself and writing music myself, it got to the point where it was like, this is by far some of the greatest music that has ever been made. And I think
It really is.
like not enough people agreed to that, and it makes me upset to a to a point.
What about you, Alan?
Let's see. King Diamond, Merciful Fate was something I got into a little bit later. It was not high school material for me. Just for whatever reason, none of us ever had any King Diamond albums. So I would see them at record shows and stuff, and always, the logo is very distinctive. The artwork's like, okay, that's kind of interesting looking, but never picked it up. Probably the first thing I heard, this is not the way you want to start, was the No Presents for Christmas thing. I'm pretty sure that's the first time I heard King Diamond's voice, like on college radio. I'm just like, oh, what the hell is this? Is that what that sounds like? I've seen those records and they looked interesting, and now it just sounds really goofy. So that did not incentivize me to go check out more right away. But one of my buddies in college, Matt, who often watches, so Matt, if you're out there, cheers. He was a huge King Diamond fan. It's actually how he met his future wife, where she was like the one girl on campus that was wearing a King Diamond shirt at one point. So he's just like, how you doing? And so, we had, pretty similar metal taste, and we found out, he's like, what do you mean you've never heard King Diamond? Let's fix that. So I was like, okay. So ended up trip to the record store. They had a CD copy of Abigail was on the shelf. So I was like, okay, there's nothing else I'm buying today. I've got a few bucks. Matt won't shut up about this band. Okay, I'll give it a chance, and picked it up, and instantly liked it quite a bit. And so started following up with others from his catalog. Then Conspiracy. Matt loaned me some of them, so I had some of them on dubbed cassettes for a long time. Merciful Fate came a little bit later. For whatever reason, Matt never really talked about Merciful Fate. He was really on the King Diamond solo material hard. And so it was a couple years later that I got Merciful Fate. I had heard a song here and there, but the first time I got a Merciful Fate album, I had walked into a record store in Texas that I frequented. And by frequented, I mean, I was probably there 3 times a week. I mean, the owner knew me on a first name basis. He held stuff under the counter for me. Just like, as soon as the door wouldn't even close, be like, here, you want to hear this? Just like, yeah, I probably do. But walked in one day and he had a picture disc copy of Don't Break the Oath sitting on the shelf. He was selling kind of his personal collection through the store. It's just a little mom and pop store, but a good one. I was just like, I've never heard that one or picked that one up. I think it's time to check out some of the Merciful Fate stuff. And so I picked that up, took it back to the dorm, put it on the turntable, and just that opening guitar line before it was even done, just the hairs were standing up on my arms. I was like, oh, this is just going to kick my ass. And it did, and I've loved it ever since. So yeah, that's where I went in terms of getting into King Diamond and Merciful Fate. I'll just go and say here, over the years, there was a point where I got pretty burned out on King Diamond in sort of the early 2000s. So this has actually been a good opportunity for me to revisit, especially some of his later stuff that I haven't played very much over the years. I just kind of hit a saturation. It was one of those things, maybe I was playing it too much or too often, but as we'll talk about, some albums came out that didn't wow me. And even, I like King's voice a lot. It is, sometimes it will grate on you if you're not in the right mood.
It's very polar. It's a very polarizing style. I mean,
oh yeah, there are people that
typically vocalists use falsetto as a dynamic, not rely almost entirely on it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
People, it's like people either love it or they hate it, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of middle ground.
Yeah, I love it, but I can get enough of it. And so, yeah, for a while, I was just kind of like, I just don't need to hear anymore for right now. And so, I kind of laid off the King Diamond in recent years. But this is a great chance to revisit it and talk it over with you guys, which I'm looking forward to.
One thing I did have noticed about regarding his vocals is when he was younger, Fatal Portrait, and of course the Merciful Fate stuff, his voice was super high, and it really made it really creepy. And as he moved to the States and the recording techniques changed. Obviously the album started to be recorded digitally, as opposed to onto tape. So they lost a little bit of feel, and I noticed his vocals he started relying on more mid-range. And on some of the blander albums, to me, he sounds a little flat, and I kind of miss that soaring high, that real evil, piercing the heavens, falsetto screams. But I guess we'll get into that. You guys ready to jump into this?
I think so. So
yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
Melanie's up first.
Well, just as
Go
reminders,
ahead.
sorry, Mel, before we jump in. So yeah, we're going to, instead of chronological, we're going to rank these. We're going to start with our least favorite, work our way up to our most favorite for each of us. Standard disclaimer here. I know people are going to yell at us in the chat anyway, but still, it bears saying, we're ranking these albums relative to one another. So, even albums that we have far down the list, it doesn't mean we're saying the album stinks or that we dislike it or anything necessarily. There may be some that we don't. But we're just comparing that relative to other King Diamond records, and we don't like them as much. So bear us out. Not everything can be at the top of the list. Something's got to be 10th place. Something's got to be, in this case, 12th place. We've got 12 albums. We can't do a three-way, a 9-way tie for third place. That's kind of bullshit. So something's got to start at the bottom of the list. So bear us out. I think there's probably not going to be many albums that we really trash or dislike. King's catalog is pretty consistent in general. It has its, some ups and downs, but I don't think you're going to hear us complaining a huge amount about any album being a total stinker. But
I got a little trashing in me.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, there's a couple I'm not nuts about, and I'll have a few I have a few complaints along the way, but. Again, I just like to start these ranking videos with that disclaimer that, hear us out. Just because we have an album towards the bottom of the list doesn't automatically mean that it was a horrible album or anything like that. And with that, we'll let Melanie go first, and people can start telling us all three how crazy we are for our first few picks at the bottom.
Get the flaming bags of internet garbage ready to hurl. Here we go.
It'll be interesting to see what people think about this. So I actually listened to this today just to make sure that this was still my least favorite out of the whole catalog.
Fatal Portrait, we may have to discuss you being on here.
Some people don't like that one.
But I think it may not be a surprise. Graveyard is my least favorite album in the discography, and a lot of it is because it's probably one of the last ones that I ever really listened to. Obviously before the most recent ones. And in general, I don't really like the way it sounds. It sounds kind of muddied. His voice doesn't seem as powerful and strong, similar to what you were saying, Marty, where it just wasn't as high. He wasn't singing like with much. It didn't seem like he was singing with much passion. And it's got a little bit more of a slower, doomy element to it, which typically I don't mind that. Some people have said like there's some Sabbath sounding in there, which in general just never really stuck with me out of this whole catalog. And even after Andy LaRock remastered it in 2009, listening to it again today, I still kind of was like, yeah, I just don't know if I don't hate the album, but it's not one that I would pull off the shelf and put on first out of the whole discography.
I've already dealt with that.
But oddly enough, though, it's one of the more successful ones in terms of the charts, I guess, is what I was seeing today. It peaked at like number 23 in the Finnish charts and had a very good commercial following, which is interesting, I guess, to me, considering some of the other albums that came out after that. But I guess at the time it came out in 96 and they had done a 5-year hiatus. And the one previous to that, I felt like it felt a little stale, a little flat. Like they pushed it out a year after the album before this, and it just didn't seem
Lullabye.
like, yeah, it just didn't seem. It seemed like this could have been a B-sides cut, maybe thrown into a compilation, and maybe not have been its own album. But I know some people actually love this album. But it just never stuck with me. And I honestly like getting through it now. Getting through the whole album today, I eventually turned it off when I got halfway through it. I was like, I still don't really care too much for this album. I'm going to move on now. So yeah, I mean, but again, I know people absolutely love the album. I think I just saw somebody, Nikki Goods is already like, what the heck already?
There's a few torches being lit.
People are already mad. Damn it. Yep.
But again, I'm used to the Merciful Fate, like Fatal Portrait, and the first albums. And this one just, it's the sixth album. It just never, or sixth or seventh, I don't remember. Seventh, just was never one of my favorites. So it's not awful. It's not an awful album. It's just one that I probably, I don't even own it on a physical format. Eventually I might get it, but I'll probably never put it on unless somebody tries to tell me I should try and listen again. So maybe 10 years from now, I'll listen to it again and say, all right, I guess it's better than maybe I had said back on Marty's stream.
All right. Starting off with the Graveyard. Alan.
The subject matter, yeah. That's
I want to
true.
start on
Subject matter was
something.
sick.
Yeah, I'm going to start on a different one. I don't have physical copies of most of them to hold up, so I'm just going to call them out. All right, bottom of the list for me is Give Me Your Soul, Please. The last album to date from King Diamond. This one, I have never played it very much. I heard it when it came out probably a couple of times. I replayed it some this week to kind of, shake off the rust and see what I really thought of it. And again, it's not terrible. There's nothing really wrong with it musically. But everything else, it doesn't really have any points in favor of it either. It's got a stupid title. It's got very lame artwork for the cover. And these are, again, these may seem like, little silly things, but King Diamond's got a legacy. We're obviously, got 12 albums to work through. And a lot of times the visual aspects are a big deal for King Diamond. So having such a horrible album cover definitely, it starts you off with a bad taste in your mouth. And story-wise, there's just not much to this one at all. It very much feels like a retread. It's got the same story elements he's done before. Snippets of the music feel like things you've heard before, probably more than once. The story doesn't even necessarily feel like a whole lot of effort was put into it. The story is something we do have to talk about with King Diamond albums. I know a lot of folks are often very dismissive of the lyrics and such. It's like, I don't care what he's saying in a band. I think with King Diamond, that's got to be an exception, though, because the story, the concepts going on are a huge central part of the whole identity of King Diamond as a solo project. And so I don't think you can just write that off. And when the stories are really flat, that does hurt my enjoyment of the albums anyway. And this one, there's not much effort put into it. There's a person in a house with a ghost. There's no setup whatsoever. You're not really told, why is the person in this particular house? It's almost just like let's just, cover the basics. We've got, little girl gets hurt by crazy person. Somebody stumbles into house. Some supernatural something happens. Are we done yet? Yeah, I guess we're done. Call it a day. Print it, press it, sell it. So again, musically, performance-wise, not a bad album, but you can say that about all the King Diamond albums. And that's going to be another issue tonight is every single album, almost, you can say the performances are pretty good. They're going to range from, okay, maybe a few are average and some are stellar, but there's never really horrible performances, I don't think. Maybe there's an exception that's skipping my mind, but that means you've got to have something to start giving it some points above just being a decent album. And this one, I think it's real average for him. You feel like with the lineup they could do better. And there's no reason for me to go back and listen to this album. I've played it again a couple of times today, even, and it's like, no, there's just nothing else here. And it may just be that, again, King Diamond's been very consistent over the years. He's stuck to his guns, which is something that's very admirable. Even through the 90s when so many bands were tinkering with their formula in ways they shouldn't have. I'm talking to you, Destruction. King Diamond stuck to the formula, and people appreciated that, myself included. But at this point, by the time you get to this one, album number 12, the formula feels a bit tired. if he seems like they're not injecting anything interesting, they're not giving it a new spin or twist, and maybe he's wrote himself into a corner. I mean, if he changes the formula too much, it's not going to feel like King Diamond. But if he just puts out, more and more rehashes of, Ghost Girl and Haunted House, there's a finite number of those that we need. And I think this one's past the limit. So for me, I've got Give Me Your Soul Please at the bottom of the pile. Not a terrible album. I'm not saying it's crap or garbage. I'm just saying it feels like it's been done and done much better at least a couple of times before this. So that's my take. Marty, now you've got to start at the bottom of your list.
Yep. I respect that bottom of your list, but I will see your Give Me Your Soul and raise you a House of God. Okay. What is this? The ninth? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, ninth album by King. This later era stuff, there is some good stuff in this. This is easily my least favorite King Diamond album. I revisit it once or twice a year just to touch base and say, okay, have I changed? Am I gonna finally click? Because like I said, the elements are all here. The formula, they never really stray too far from the formula stylistically, songwriting wise. Or, I mean, you've got one of the world's best shredder guitar players ever with Andy LaRock co-writing a lot of these songs. He never plays a wrong note. Even if the song is bad, the solos are fantastic. And it just kind of got for me once the move to Dallas happened, eventually the album started to sound very clinical, very sterile, very digital. Let's be honest, they sound very digital. You listen to the first first 3 albums, there's still, the atmosphere, that European recording on tape atmosphere is like the 6th member of the band to me. It's like this evil atmosphere that lurks on that stuff. It really helps drive this material home. And when it comes down to this stuff, that atmosphere isn't there, which is a minor complaint. If the songs are strong enough, it should be able to shine past a sterile production. But when the songs kind of lack dynamics, it starts to become more about the concept than it is the music for me. And if I don't care about the concept, and on this album, I could care less what's even going on here. I know it's some satanic thing. I don't know. I don't remember, but the lyrics struck me as dumb. The concept struck me as dumb. The songs just seemed pretty lifeless, uninspired. I saw him at one of the metal fests, I think on this album. It might've been Voodoo, but I think it was this album. And I love King Diamond. There was a time that, King Diamond and Merciful Fate was pretty much a good 70% of what I listened to. But I stood there and watched 4 songs and I left. Granted, it was day 2 or 3. And I was tired. And, once you start getting slammed with so much volume and so many bands in a short period of time, it could be, the best band in the world up there. And if you're tired, it doesn't matter. So, I watched 3 or 4 songs and left because it was during this era. And it just, my opinion, is it horrible? No. There's some redeeming shit on here, but it just isn't, this isn't good quality stuff for me. My 12 for sure. Like I said, when the concept starts to be the main pull for the album, that's cool. And it's really good when it works, like at the first half of this catalog. But when the musical theater thing, it doesn't really appeal to me. And I'm more about the full package, when it's working with the music. But when the theater, I don't know. We'll get into more of that when we get there. But yeah, that's my number 12. Sorry, House of God. Okay.
So we've all got different titles at the bottom of the barrel.
Yep. I'm actually shocked. I'm kind of shocked about that.
But for me, it's going to be interesting to see, how far up do we each put each of these? Because with some of these, there's not a huge difference. For like me, towards the bottom of the list, there's not a huge variation. I could have flip-flopped a couple albums pretty easily. Yeah. So I'll be interested. Like if someone's got one of these albums in their top 3, yeah, that's going to be really interesting. But if everyone's got covering these in their next 2 or 3 picks, then yeah, okay, that'll be kind of not unexpected. But yeah, let's work our way up the ladder.
All right, number 11.
It's Give Me Your Soul, please.
You know what? I'm gonna stand with you on this. That's my number 11 also. I'll jump in with you.
I probably have the most criticism on this one. It sounds very like very overproduced, like too clean sounding, too overproduced.
Too produced. Yep.
Very, very digital, not evil sounding enough.
No.
I agree the artwork is horrible. It reminds me of a really bad video game that I played a long time ago. It was like a horror video game. But in general, the way the music sounds, it's not horrible. Again, it's overproduced, but the lyrics and the overall way King sings on this album and like almost talks too much on this album, as if he's sitting at a round table with other cast members and they're reading a script back and forth to each other. Like that's what it seems like, as if it's like they're practicing for a Broadway musical.
Yeah.
A horror Broadway musical.
Again, musical theater. That starts to kind of take the forefront as this catalog goes on, I think.
Right. And I understand like maybe why they did it this way. But it just, for me, it was too much of a 2000, like a later 2000 metal song, like metal album for me. Like it didn't have any of the very evilness that I loved about King Diamond. It didn't sound nearly as much as the older catalog that I absolutely love. And again, it's just the overproduction. Like you could have assumed that David Draymond from Disturbed produced it. Because he was pretty big at that time. Coming out of in that era of metal, obviously, it's probably some of the better stuff that came out. I would assume that era of metal is probably one of my least favorites at the time. It was very new metal heavy back then. And going off buying an albums, I'm out of high school now. I'm working. This was definitely a first pick for me in the record store, and I probably loved it back when it first came out. But across everything else in there, this is one of those albums that I probably will barely listen to. I listened to it again today, and I was like, it's not awful, but I don't have any desire to hunt down a nice vinyl pressing for it or anything like that. So
there's one at the local shop here in town, and I picked it up. I'm like, you know what? I'll buy this on vinyl. I flipped around. They wanted $45 for it, and I'm like, you know what? They can sit.
Yep.
No thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Good call. Alan, what's your number 11?
Okay, here's where I make some people mad, because some people in the chat have already been mentioning they really like this album. And I'll preface it by saying, I don't dislike this album. I've just never played it very much. So I don't have much history with it. And there's one big thing that irks me about the album. So I've got it way down here. It's Puppet Master. Sorry, but it's coming in at 11th. Musically, not a bad album. Sounds pretty strong. Much better produced than a couple of the others, like Melanie mentioned. But when this came out, it did not hold my attention at all. So okay, there's a King Diamond album, and I heard it once or twice, and I didn't buy it, and I never came back to listen to it for ages. I'll bet this week's the first time I've played this album I'm pretty sure I haven't heard this album in the past 10 years. I felt no real pull towards it. It's not terrible. Again, performances are pretty good. One thing that hurts me a little bit with this era of King Diamond is, while, Andy, of course, yes, is an absolute guitar hero, I am not a huge Mike Weed fan. He's not a bad guitarist, but there's just always been something about his playing that doesn't click with me. So I'm not as big on his era stuff. He does pretty well on this album. I actually playing it, and revisiting it this week. I actually paid attention, looking at who's playing each solo and kind of comparing them. I was like, yeah, it doesn't sound too bad here, but for whatever reason, when I see his name on it, it's already kind of like oh, good, it's another Mike Weed project. Okay, let's try it again. My big complaint with Puppet Master, though, and this is where you kind of get back into the story versus the music. Music, not bad. Can get behind the music. I think this is just a dumb story. Lyrically, this one leaves me really... Nothing happens. Nothing. Let's walk through it. And, Guy goes to a puppet show looking for his wife who went missing a year ago. So he's like, what? Sitting at home thinking, time to put up the Christmas tree. Shouldn't Victoria be home from the play by now? Maybe I should go look for her myself rather than contacting the authorities 11 and a half months ago. Goes to puppet theater, gets, hit in head, evil magic turns him into a puppet, and he sits there as a puppet for the next 9 songs. There's literally one of the last songs is like, 18 years later, I'm still sitting on the shelf. Like, what? There's no action to this story at all. Nothing happened. I'm turned into a puppet and I sit there and I'm sad. 18 years later, I'm sitting on the same shelf and I'm sad. There's literally a song called So Sad. It's just like, come on. And the whole puppet master himself, why is he he's dealing with demons, doing forbidden blood magic stuff, sticking people's souls into puppets. And his grand plan at the end of the album is to help his kids open a second puppet theater in a new city. So 20 years later, he's using his dark necromantic arts to franchise? Fuck that. So dumb. I spent I remember just, waiting for the other shoe to drop in that story, hearing that album, and it's just like, nothing ever happens. It's just, it's mind-boggling. And yes, and again, you sometimes have to balance, musically, I don't have a lot of complaints about the album, but I cannot get past this dumb story. I just can't get over it. So, I don't want to listen to it because it just bugs the crap out of me. That's my rant for the night. Got it out of the way early. So, I know this is an album a lot of people rank very highly. It got a lot of good press when it came out. It had positive reviews. At the time, I was a bit burned out on King Diamond, like I mentioned earlier. So, maybe I didn't give it, as much of a fair shake at the time. But nothing's really, the combination of Mike Weed on guitar and a puppet sitting on a shelf for 18 years plus 9 songs. No, sorry. I'm going to pass, and I'm going to rank it 11th. That's me. So, Marty, I'll go try to defend myself in the chat while
they're out for you. They're out
I'm sure they are.
The wagons are circling. There's dung and various burning things getting prepared, and
if they want to defend it on musical merit, absolutely fine. I yield. If they're going to stand up for that puppet being somehow a cool storyline, we're about to have words in the chat. But you take it away, Marty, while I deal with this.
Well, Melanie spilled the beans. Mine is "Give Me Your Soul, Please," and much to the chagrin of my buddy Zoller, Craig Zoller, who is going to be on this program. We're getting him slated for some shows coming up here. But he says this is a creeper album. To go back to this, he said this has been his recent favorite, and I've listened to it a couple times this week, and I'm with Melanie. There's some good parts in here. This happened before King Diamond's heart attack. He had bypass surgery, quit smoking. He was a connoisseur of Danish cigarettes, which are typically pretty horrible for you, and years and years of doing it. I guess that could probably be part of the culprit for that falsetto kind of going away. But this album, he sounds kind of tired vocally. A lot of kind of talking. He's kind of like talking through it, like she said, like kind of like a table read for a script. Some good musical parts here and there, some interesting vocal melodies that come in once in a while, but it's just not enough to keep me excited or interested. And plus there's 13 fucking songs on this album. I mean, look at all the songs, seriously. And it gets a little lengthy, a little samey, and the production is pretty sterile. And again, it's a story I could give a shit about. I mean, if she's in the story, I don't care. It's the way it goes. Melanie nailed it on that for sure. And we're back with number 10, Melanie.
Yeah, I had a hard time with this one. I went back and forth. So mine is House of God. And oddly enough, this is one that I used to love quite a bit when I was younger. And I think the reason behind that was simply it's just it was a very anti-Christian theme.
Yeah. A
And it
little
was
more
going
so than
back,
any of the other albums really
yeah,
have been. Yeah.
less of the horror theatric background, I guess. I mean, there's still some of that in there, obviously. But like, you know, King Diamond is known for, or was known for, being a Satanist, and that was always interesting to me back then. When this came out, I was doing like religion classes and stuff like that. I think he now claims he's not anymore. I don't really know. It doesn't matter. But now that I'm older and I've listened to it, it just is a boring album to me. It's not
Yeah.
horrible. There's some good key points like on here, but now that I'm older and I've got a different ear. I always say my ears are older now.
Yeah.
It's not as fun to listen to. It gets a little stale towards the middle of the album, to the point of where I start to block it out that I'm even listening to it. And for that, albums like that, I typically I throw to the wayside, and then hope that maybe someday, again in the future, it'll grow on me more. Today, that was not the case. It did not grow on me any more than I had hoped that it would have, because there were a couple other albums that I debated putting lower than this, but I just couldn't get past a lot of the things on this album. Again, it's not horrible. It's just, yeah, I don't know. And the remaster did not sound great either. I don't know. I feel bad. Andy is remastering all these albums. They just don't satisfy my sound at all. So
Right on. That was number 10, right?
10. Yep.
All right, 10.
10 for me. I am going to follow suit with Melanie and list House of God here. And I think I like this album more than either of you do from the descriptions you've already given. Points taken, though. The album drags on a bit. It's not always the most interesting. It is easy to kind of tune out chunks of this one for sure. And yes, the album cover. Yeah, that's a thing. But I guess one reason I like this one, and one reason that it ranks better than the bottom two, the story here is at least a little bit outside of King's usual wheelhouse. It still has some of the elements of Gothic romance and such, but it's at least not in the context of haunted house or random ghost spirit murder victim below the age of 8. It it plays around a little bit more with the good versus evil, holy versus satanic thing, which, yes, for a lot of us is kind of trite by this point in our lives. But at the same time, it's not something King had ever really directly tackled on a previous album. He'd done, lots of evil stuff, but it was usually like, supernatural evil or lunatic evil. And so it was at least a little different. And coming after, the previous couple of albums, just looking at the list, because sometimes I get these mixed up in the middle of his discography. But let's see, where's House of God?
Ninth.
Yeah. So before this, you'd had, Voodoo, Graveyard, Spider's Lullabye. We'll talk about those, of course. But, some of those, definitely you were already seeing ideas get recycled from earlier albums. And so this one at least felt like, okay, he is exploring something a little bit different with the concept. So I give it some points for that. Do I think it's a great concept? No, it's, like I said, not something I'm going to dive into. Ooh, that's so deep that he's playing good versus evil off of one another in the same church. But at least, it did have a different feel. Then it wasn't just another haunted house story like a lot of his other albums were. So, yeah, not his finest hour, not a terrible one. But at least had a little bit of a different twist to it. So I'll put House of God 10 higher than a couple of other offerings.
All right.
What you got for 10th, Marty?
Number 10 for me, and again, this is going to see some shit flying, is Voodoo.
Oh, God.
Voodoo. Again, I would say this is a bit of a heavier album. And judging from the storyline being set in New Orleans in the South, deep South, you got little elements of a tribal, shamanistic, voodoo priestess type of thing. Like the title track's got some, tribal drums in there. And you know what? At its core, this isn't a bad album. I just never really connected fully with the story, and I never really connected fully with the music. And this is probably, between this and House of God, are the two I listen to the least. But when I have listened to it, I'm like, oh, geez, why don't I listen to this more? It's pretty okay. But again, 14 fucking songs. Come on. I mean, you got to tell a story, and you got to break up the story into chapters. But I don't know. I just at this point in the career, I like this. This is good, but it's starting to seem like a job. We need an album. This came out in 98. We're at Norman Recordings in Dallas, which shifted over to Nomad. Andy's recording his stuff in his own studio at Lost Angered Recording Studios in Gothenburg, Sweden. So there's a little bit of disconnect. They're not in the studio working together. It's, my songs, your songs, we'll put them together. This is our album. I like it. It's okay. But I listen to some of these other albums a lot more, and a lot better connection to. And I mean, a year down the road, I might pick this up again and think, what was I thinking? But as of right now, I like this. I like the idea that he's trying something different, setting the story in a different realm with different occult themes. But, it's all right. Good album. But it's my number 10. Melanie, you're back. Uh-oh. People are throwing shit. Is there garbage being thrown? Let's see.
They're mostly sticking to, the smaller pieces of fruit so far, at least.
All right. This might actually upset some people. Mine is Puppet Master for number 9. I agreed. It's a stupid concept that I never really got behind. I feel like this was just a fun album that he made. It was a general idea that he got as an inspiration when he was in Budapest. He just wanted to have fun, throw out a fun album out there, and have a little bit more of a subdue theme compared to all the other albums. And it just never stuck with me at all. And I don't understand why people love it. I really don't. But that's their thing. I do hate the album artwork. I just don't like it. And the thing that I absolutely just don't like about the album at all, and I usually skip the song, is the song So Sad. And it's just, I understand it's his wife that's on there with him. And he's like, that's great. Like, you incorporated her into your music and stuff, but I could have done without ever hearing her on one of his albums. And I just don't like that song. And I can honestly say, out of all of the King Diamond albums, that's probably the only song that I can honestly say I just don't like it. I will skip it. I can't get through it. It's just so cheesy to me. It's so cheesy and corny.
Pretty cheesy. There's some cheesy shit going on there.
Yeah.
But there's some good. The music is really quite good. It's, I don't know. Go ahead.
Nikki Goods.
You're killing Nikki. You're killing
him. But yeah, I just, again, I probably would have ranked it a little bit lower, but I listened to it today and it stuck with me a little bit more. I enjoyed it a little bit more than the other, 3 albums that I talked about already. But again, lower on the totem pole, probably. I might actually pick this up on a physical format. I've seen it around, but in general, it seems like a little bit of more of a hokey album compared to other ones.
This was the one too. Didn't this one, at least the first person, come with like the bonus CD of King just telling the story?
I have that. It's really bad.
Yeah,
it's really dumb.
Very much, I think, I forgot that until but
it is like done on someone's cell phone, like with him in front of a candle and then he turned into a puppet. It's like, oh my God.
And then he sat there for 18 years. Ooh.
Yep.
Yeah. The puppet master consorted with the demon to obtain unholy power to achieve his goal of having the most successful puppet show in all of Budapest. Come on, man, you gotta have some goals, a little ambition. Man, come on.
I feel like this one has a little bit of a cult following. Like people are
It
just
was, yeah, people liked it even out of the gate.
Yeah.
I remember it, people digging it, and that's cool if they do. Absolutely, I'm goofing around with it, but I have no problem if folks like the album. That's awesome. It's just not the one for me.
All right, Alan, you're up with your number 9.
Okay, number 9. My number 9 is The Graveyard, and this one, I will say, now this one, I think there is an example here of, in terms of the musicianship, this is not one of the better outings. The performances, they're not terrible, but they do seem lackluster compared to a lot of the other albums. They're just not as bright, not as dynamic. Part of it may be that it's a longer album and they just, are having a hard time coming up with ideas to keep propelling it along. That said, I don't mind this album much. It's a little bit of a sentimental favorite. I did play it a bunch when it came out. It's so don't dislike it. Again, replaying it this week, I was interested to see where it was going to fall because I hadn't played it in a long time, and I know it's one that a lot of folks rate pretty low. It's got for whatever this is worth, it has the lowest rating on Metal Archives of anything in King Diamond's discography. So it's like, I'll go back and give it a chance. And I know some people really shit on this album, really take a dump on this album. I see why they don't like it. That yes, it's especially compared to everything that came before it. This one is sliding down the ladder several rungs. But that said, at the end of the day, I can still listen to the album, and it's pretty enjoyable. It does drag on too long. It could use, some stronger production. It could use better performances at times, but it's not a bad album. I listened to it. I didn't mind that I listened to it, and I'll probably listen to it again, before 10 years goes by. So not a standout in the catalog for me, but we're getting to the point where the albums are, even with House of Gods, like it's not terrible for me, So this one, I can give this one, sort of the weak, lukewarm kind of thumbs up, even though I've got it down here at 9. So I'll put The Graveyard right here and pass it over to Marty for his number
9. My number 9 is I'm with Melanie. Puppet Master. I listened to this a lot more than Voodoo. When I got this, I really worked it to like it, because initially I didn't, but I kept listening to it. Blood to Walk, someone mentioned, is a good song. There's some good songs on here. The thing that Zoller, again, he's telling me how great this album is. I need to spin it more, and I agree. There's some great shit on here. I do like it, but when it's the interaction between husband and wife over a harpsichord, the love story, and then where King's singing about a fucking butterfly, and the way he says butterfly, I'm just like, what the fuck am I listening to? And I hate that aspect of this album. Again, musical theater takes the forefront, and I guess I'm not a big fan of that, which is weird. I mean, we're talking about King Diamond, you're one of my favorites. Obviously, theater is a partial influence. He kind of introduced, I guess, but he totally ran with the concept album thing in metal. I mean, it started to be commonplace. He showed how well it could work, but this is a pretty good album. If the story bugs me, the love story stuff, the interaction between characters bugs me, the butterfly shit bugs me. Is that in So Sad? I can't remember, but
9. I think so. It's in that part of the album.
Yeah.
Oh boy, it's so cheap. It's so cringy. It just makes me want to turn in my metal card, I guess, a little bit. But I do like this album. It's pretty good. Yeah, number 9. Melanie pretty much covered everything on that album pretty much perfectly. I'm just piling on a little bit.
Yeah. So so it is interesting here again. We've gotten through the bottom 25% of the catalog, and we've got them in different orders, but we all seem to agree that some of these more recent King Diamond albums are not among our favorites.
I think this one might upset people.
If it's Fatal Portrait, we have a problem.
No, it's
Houston,
not.
we have a problem.
I don't know. It might. My next number 8 is Abigail II. And I struggled with this because I obviously love Abigail, and enough to buy the newest graphic novel that came out last year.
What is it with metal
But
bands doing comics now? We got Anthrax, Halloween, King Diamond.
I think for this
Come on.
album, and I did something that I try not to do with my favorite artists, is that I had it so hyped in my head. Like this is the revenge. This is the sequel of Abigail, which is such an iconic album. So I had really high expectations, and it fell very flat for me. It's not horrible. It is one that I've listened to. Again, the story is, it's Abigail. It's iconic. It was enough to enjoy that I bought the graphic novel. I think I have the picture disc of this, but I didn't take it out because it's framed. I didn't feel like dealing with it. For me, I overhyped it in my head, so it was disappointing in that regard. It's not a horrible album. I did get a little bit bored in the middle of the album. There's a couple of songs that are just in general boring for me. I mean, the production sounds great. I don't feel like his vocals aren't as demanding and evil sounding as obviously in Abigail. And for when you do a sequel album, I think it came too far after Abigail. It was too far after into his discography. He had gone. I feel like it just, if maybe had come out in like 96 or something, maybe it would have come stronger for me. But again, I don't know. I tried listening to it again today, and I thought maybe it would go higher after I did, but I still have the same thoughts on it. I can't see myself changing my mind anytime soon.
Well, I have some conflicting opinions on that album, but I'll get to that when I get to that in my catalog, in my ranking. Ellen.
Well, I'm going to get to it right now because I've got Abigail number 2 at 8 also. And yeah, it's not a bad album. I didn't have exactly the same problem Melanie ran into, because when this one came out, I was obviously interested to hear what it was going to be like, but I also had a lot of trepidation because, like you said, Melanie, this was coming out a long time after the original idea, which always makes me a bit worried when they try to go back to some former piece of magic and bring it back. And it was coming after some albums that varied in terms of how much I had liked them. I was definitely, by this point, this came out, what, 2002?
Yep.
Yeah. This was very much the point where I was feeling, a bit burned out on King Diamond stuff. So I'm like, I want to give it a chance. I want to pick it up. I don't know if it's a good idea to go back and do Abigail Part 2. It felt, and maybe this was me being cynical, but it did feel a little bit like, especially House of God before had not gone over particularly well when it came out, that maybe King, was feeling like, slipping here a little bit, gotta do something to, get the fan base all hyped up again. And apparently it worked very well with Melanie's case. And I remember when I first heard the album, I hated it. I thought it sounded horrible. The story didn't interest me. The music, I played it once. It's just like, oh God, that was hard to get through. And I put it aside for a couple of days, played it again. I'm just like, nope, I'm not wasting any more time on this. This is not what I want. And again, I think part of it seriously was, in hindsight, just burnout on King Diamond, between King Diamond and Merciful Fate. Because, again, he had both bands going simultaneously through a good chunk of the 90s, like you mentioned earlier, Marty. And so, I mean, it was just, album after album after album from one or the other project. We all digested an awful lot of King through the 1990s. And I think by this point, I was just kind of a bit fried with it. And so when the album didn't hit me well, and I was kind of worried about, trying to get the Abigail spirit back, pun intended. I set it aside. I got rid of it quick. I bet I didn't keep that album a month before I traded it off to somebody. Now, fast forward in time, I've revisited it. I like it a lot more than I did back then. in terms of performance, I think it sounds quite good. It does a reasonable job of sort of recapturing a little bit of the spark and pop from King Diamond's heyday. They sound lively. It sounds like they were really pushing on this pretty good.
I agree. I agree with
it's fine. Going back through the story and stuff, it's not bad. It's much better than some. I've complained about some of the other stories, but no, I don't have a huge complaints about this story. I agree with Melanie completely. There's some stuff in the middle that it just doesn't serve much of a purpose. It feels like it's there just to kind of pad out the album a bit, but overall, it's not bad at all now. I mean, we're getting to albums where I can say that, yeah, overall I like that album. But there's just other albums I like more. So I can't really rank this one much higher. There's definitely, I'm double checking my list to make sure I'm not off track. There's definitely sort of a demarcation in my list here that, from this one down, they all are definitely in the 8 through 12 slot. And everything above this is definitely in the 1 through 7 slot. So that's why Abigail 2 has got to fall here. It's apparently grown on me some over the years. I see it through a better pair of eyes now, but I still just can't rank it higher because the stuff above it I just like more. So that's where I stand with Abigail 2 today. Marty, I think you got this one rated a little higher. So what do you have at number 8?
Number 8 for me is The Graveyard.
Okay.
This album I got as a promo. A lot of these middle era 2000 albums I get promos, but initially I disliked this album, but I started listening to it because I had to review it, and it really clicked big time with me. What bugged me, King, I think what really, obviously the subject matter is horrific, talks about child abuse and other really awful things, and what makes it just feel really cringy is King puts himself in the first person in the story where he's the one that did all this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But partially some of the stuff, but and it bugs me in some of the songs where he's really playing up the crazy person, the doing the la 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 la, but doing it off time so it sounds more crazy, and shit like that initially bugged me. But I really like the music on this. I like the concept. I like the feel in some of the songs. I think the music and the concept really work well together. The Andy songs on here I liked better. I can't tell you which ones they are right now, but I remember pining over this record when I was getting into it and marking my head, oh, that's an Andy song. That's, I like that a little bit better, but it's got a crisp production. It's not necessarily lifeless. I like this album. It's my number 8. It could have went this part of the ranking started to get a little difficult for me because there's some stuff in here I wanted to put higher, but the front half of his catalog is so loaded with bangers. It's hard to thwart the top spots, but The Graveyard I think is pretty good at 8. I'm pretty happy with it at 8. I like it. I will grab this from time to time and enjoy it. Crazy King. There's some interesting little twists in the story that I thought were like heads on the wall. I like that song. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good album. It's a good one. I like it better than Voodoo. I like it better than Puppet Master easily.
Fair. Something you touched on, Marty, before we go through our next round. That album, did get a lot of, talk at the time because it, before this, he was dealing with, spooky stories and, insane stories. This one has a lot to do with insanity, but yeah, it has, the child abuse angle in the lyrics, which, something I think that's worth pointing out. And I noticed it going through old reviews of King Diamond albums this week was, especially in this day and age, people are, very quick, to sort of, jump on and criticize and condemn people for certain things. And when you look through King Diamond's catalog, there is a pattern. There's a lot of tragic young females in King Diamond stories. But I think it would be a huge mistake for anybody to look at that and want to get really bent out of shape over it. King Diamond's always been very articulate, very well spoken. While he's a satanist, he's always been very calm about it. He's not out there, as a hell-raising kind of, brain-dead Satanist. He's, very thoughtful about it. He's never said or done anything to promote any kind of, misogyny or anything that would say like, yeah, kids, let's chop them all up. I hate children or anything like that. There's nothing ever indicating that he's taking the side of the axe murderers and the child molesters in these stories whatsoever. So it's just worth mentioning because these days people look at some of that stuff from a very strong point of view. But yeah, while the stories can be unsettling with some of the graphic things that happen in them, nothing from King's background ever indicated that was meant to glorify the acts that these horrible people were doing in the stories. The whole point was that yes, they're horrible people doing horrible things, and you should be horrified by it. So I figured it was worth mentioning.
Yeah, he did an interview on that. I recently watched it a while back, and it's a very short clip, but it was in general. I think he was getting a lot of flack for the theme around the album for that reason. And I mean, obviously, back when this came out, that was a pretty big shock factor back then. I think it would probably not go over too well now. I think it'd be worse now if he had released a themed album like this now, with how everything is. But he pretty much more or less said what you said and explained it. But I think in general, that was probably one of the main reasons why this was my lowest one. It just didn't sit well with me in my stomach for that regard. But again, he doesn't come off as misogynist. Like, it's not anything that you see now, even in a lot of death metal and stuff like that. So
awesome. Agreed. And we're down to what? Number 7.
7. Yeah. This actually, so my number 7 is Spider's Lullabye. And I this one was hard. This was hard because it is a very, very good album.
It is.
It's a very good album. It's the first album that's not like a full concept album. There's short stories on it. Every single song stands out, in my opinion, before that reason. But I think for me, this came too late into my life of appreciation. And it's a new taste of mine that it's starting to grow on to me more. I think this is probably one of the forgotten albums in the discography that I just often forgot was even there. But I do feel that it's a little bit underrated now after, especially listening to it today. But the ones that I'm about to get into, there's a little bit more, personal bias there, a little bit more, backstory to them. So this was tough. I went back and forth with this one. I was going to rank it a little bit higher, but it was so hard because again, the earlier catalog is so stacked for me. But again, it's not a terrible album. Like, there's some amazing songs. Like, I love the song "The Poltergeist."
Oh, it's so good.
I love that song. And if I ever make like in Room 17 is another one that I absolutely love. I mean, even Spider's Lullabye, the self-title track is great. Like, there's so many great songs on this album, but it just, again, I feel like I came a little bit too late to it to really fully rank it any higher. So some people are probably going to really hate me for this because I know it's got a pretty big following.
All right. Alan, what is your number 7?
I'm just going to sing the same lullaby that Melanie was singing. I'll put Spider's Lullabye right here at number 7 too. And yeah, this one's a little hard to rank. For a lot of folks, and myself included, I think there's a bit of a soft spot for this album because it was the comeback album after a 5-year hiatus. King had churned out, those first, 5 or 4 or 5 classic albums early on. And then essentially, he got busy with the Merciful Fate reunion. And it took, a few years before another King Diamond solo album came out. And so, when word of this came out, there was a lot of hype. Fans were very excited. My buddy Matt, that I mentioned at the start of the stream, he was just like, "Oh man, gonna be a new King Diamond album. It's gonna rule." When it came out, my recollection is people were sort of mixed on it. Not a lot of people hated it, but it was got kind of things like, well, it's not as good as I was hoping it was going to be. Kind of Melanie, what you said earlier about, folks had this really hyped, and that makes it very easy to be underwhelmed when you finally get your hands on it and hear it for the first time. That said, there's a lot of good music on the album. It's not one I would often pick to go back to, but there's cool stuff. Y'all have mentioned some of the good tracks. I like Eastman's Cure is really good. I like the closer, To the Morgue, the kind of the almost marching, little doomy air it's got going on to it. And yeah, actually, I think it was a nice break that he didn't try to do another full concept album here. I mean, he'd obviously had, very good success with those before this point, but I was kind of glad in a way that it just went back to having some standalone songs. But then also, closed the album out with sort of, is it 3 parts or 4 parts? 4 parts. Yeah, that it still had, the sort of, the 4-part story going on to wrap the album out. So it was kind of like, yeah, you still get a little King Diamond story here, but you get some other tracks that can stand up on their own too. So yeah, it's an album that folks remember fondly as King coming back onto the scene as a solo project. But the stuff I've got higher, I just think is a bit stronger overall. So when I was ranking things again, it was kind of clear everything below this I definitely had below this, and everything yet to come ranked a little bit higher. The number 6 was close, would be the closest one. I might could have switched 6 and 7, but I'll spin my web right here and put the spider on number 7.
All right. Mark,
what are you going to put at number 7?
Number 7 for me is this overlooked classic, Abigail II.
This classic is maybe generous, but no.
Hear me out. O2. I think we're all bloated and still reeling from a very productive and enchanting black metal rise and fall of the 90s. And black metal is still very much a thing in the 2000s. For me, it was anyway. So when this came in as a promo, I'm like, oh, okay. Didn't have any expectations, threw this on. And honestly, really quickly, a couple listens, I was hooked on this album. I thought the music, granted the storyline, he gets, as he's gone on, he's gotten a lot of mileage on his stories. He has sequels, whatever, that's fine. But for me, this one, the music, there's a lot of really cool twists. And this would have ranked 3 or 4 for this chorus alone out of the song Spirits. I came with visual with sonic aids here. The bass line at the bottom of that chorus and the way it sits in the song, it's such a really cool key shift. It harkens back to the early King Diamond stuff. It's got the feel, it's got the creepiness, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. And for that song alone, it should have been 3 or 4 on the list. This album. Is the whole album as good as the song Spirits? It isn't, but it's really pretty goddamn solid. There is a lot of really good stuff on here. There isn't the character play back and forth, acting and all this crap. It's just a good story. It's interesting to hear what happened with the characters. And I think the backdrop that the story sits on is really solid, well-written, dynamic heavy metal, some great solos, some awesome songwriting. I was really, if it wasn't for the first half of the catalog, this would be higher up my list. I like this album a lot. I think, and again, when the song Spirits hit, it's number 11 on the album. I listened to it 4 or 5 times. I back it up. I love that fucking song. It's just a well-written King Diamond song. And he gets that high register again. He gets up into the creepy zone. He brings back a little bit of that nostalgia that, that sold us on the early Merciful Fate and the early King Diamond stuff. And, I get it. People kind of bag on the album. Give it another chance. Give it a spin. Listen to it with maybe different ears. There's some really cool shit on it musically. Good album.
I think if it didn't have the album title Abigail II,
The Revenge,
maybe it would have been a little bit higher for me. But again, I that mental thing of overhyping it and then just ended up being disappointed. So All right, my number 6, and I probably would have ranked this higher if the next 5 weren't such phenomenal albums, is Voodoo. And this has a very, very, I would say, bias to it. It's got a very thrashy sound to it, which is not something that you typically would coincide with King Diamond. It's got a thrashier element to it. I think, was this also the album that they were supposed to tour with Metallica, and he was like, "Fuck that, no." I can't remember if this was, this might have been the album. But for me, I remember when I was, getting into the discography and in King Diamond. This came out in '98, so I was relatively young, and obviously had already missed it being released and the hype around it. But I was such a diehard Pantera fan, and Dimebag's on this album. He does a little tiny snippet solo on the title track Voodoo. It's very little, it's very subtle, but you can tell his playing style is on that song.
I never noticed
and
that.
Was it's very snippet. He did a post around this promoting it, being like, King Diamond's awesome, like I love him. And I think King was at the time of this coming out, Pantera was in their heyday. They had released all of their, Cemetery Gates, all that stuff like that. So it sounds like there's a little bit of influences in this. And in general theme of the album, I love the theme of it. It's Louisiana. It's that hauntedness. I'm a huge, I love New Orleans. It's one of my favorite places to visit. So there's that little bit of bias. And then the album cover reminds me so much of the black metal blue wave album covers of like,
it's a
Emperor
Necrovoid cover
and Dark Funeral and Necrovoid, like all of that. So that, I guess I just remember seeing this and buying it for that reason alone. Like I judged it by the cover. I was like, is this going to be its evil, like a really evil black metal King Diamond? And it's very, for me, it's an evil album. I love it. Again, it's got that little bit of a thrasher element, and I still listen to this quite a bit. But yeah, Voodoo's got Dimebag. It's a very I feel like not a whole lot of people know that unless they're like big into the Pantera stuff. So
awesome. I'm just looking here. Nikki is still, he's still I think his puppet master should have been in his number 2 or 3, because he's,
well, I keep pulling his strings a little bit in the chat. That might be my fault.
You didn't.
He did. Yeah. Metal Neanderthal, say we want about Dime. He had great taste in music. He did. And
yep.
He was an advocate for so many other metal bands, not just, the ones similar to his.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, Alan, you're up with your number. Where are we at here?
Number 6.
7.
Nope, we're on 6.
6.
Yep.
We're on 6. And once again, I'm just staying lockstep with Melanie, and I put Voodoo at number 6.
You guys are cheating off each other's papers, and I'm at it.
He is stealing all my thunder.
I'm telling.
But yeah, points for this album. Yeah, it's a little heavier sound, a little darker sound, which worked well, and it especially worked well, compared to the previous 2 albums. With the Graveyard being, relatively far down on our lists. It was an album that struck a lot of folks as being a bit flat, a bit dull, and this album sounds a lot more lively. There's more energy to this album, so it was nice to hear the band really kind of rev it up, a little bit. Still within, the King Diamond paradigm. This is not a Machine Head album or anything like that, thank God. But yeah, they definitely injected some more life into this one compared to their previous couple of outings. So strong album. It starts off really good. The Loa House is a really good song. It really harkens a little bit, to some of those earlier classic King Diamond tracks. You can almost feel like you're going into Ammon instead of this mansion in the Louisiana darkness. That said, it's not a perfect album. There are some issues with it. Myself, I actually don't like the Necro Lord cover artwork on this, because it does give a little bit of the wrong vibe. Like you said, Melanie, this is artwork style that you very much associate with, the black metal and some of the death metal releases from the time.
It looks like the Death is Just the Beginning album covers. That's what
It
looked
does.
like.
It looks like it
Which
could
he
have
did
been,
as well. Yeah.
It looks like it could have been the cover art for any of the compilations from that time. But more than that, it's also too much of a ripoff of the Them cover, except it looks much worse, relatively speaking. It's like, okay, we've got another haunted house kind of thing all over the cover, but this time the color palette is so dark that you don't make out a whole lot. And then when you do, it's like, well, yeah, there's a house there, but there's also some giant trees blocking most of your view. So yeah, it's just like this. Very much, you glance at the cover, it's like, is this going to be Them 2, The Revenge? Wait, no, we already did Them Part 2. It's called Conspiracy. We'll talk about it later. Is it going to be Them Part 3? And in a way, it is. The story here, it's in a different setting. It's Louisiana instead of France, and it's 1932 instead of 1777. But the story elements are getting a bit recycled here. It feels like you could easily mix up a few of these character names, and you'd be right back to tales that he's told, with Abigail and stuff. And it's something that I think even King is aware of. There's in the lyrics to Abigail II, one of the middle songs. There's the back and forth between Jonathan and Abigail, where he's like, "Can I call you Miriam?" And she's like, "Yeah, you can even call me Lucy. It's just a name." It's just like, yeah, it's just fill in the blank of tragic female character here, and we'll spin another album. So those are things that bug me a little bit about Voodoo.
He was thinking he was pretty fucking clever when he does that shit.
If he thinks he's clever, he's wrong. If he's just having fun at his own expense, then absolutely go ahead and do so. Yes, like he has to capitalize the words I and them in the lyric sheet every time they pop up in an album 20 years later. If you're doing it for fun, keep on, make your own fun for sure. So yeah, overall, I like the album. Yeah, Marty, you mentioned it's got the little voodoo drums in the title track. It's a cool touch. So yeah, there's lots of interesting stuff along the way here. The album is, again, they probably could trim a little material here and there and tighten it up, but I like it overall. I think it was a very good outing for him. I just wish it didn't have so many elements that were a bit derivative from the earlier albums. But yeah, King's in his lane, and King Diamond tends to stay in his lane. That has an upside to it, but it does come with a drawback sometimes. So I have said more than enough about Voodoo. Marty, what have you got rounding out your bottom 6?
The rest of this is so uninteresting, I guess I should say, but we'll go with the Spider's Lullabye, which when it came out, what year did this come out? This came out in 95. What's happening in 95?
Biohazard.
Fire hazard in Norway.
I'm just going to say it before Rick says it. Biohazard.
Yeah, but things are burning in Norway. There's a blaze in the northern sky, and I think all metalheads are looking towards the heavens to see what's going on, and I was too. And when this came out, I bought it. I liked it, but it took me a year or so later to revisit it to realize how good this album is. From the Other Side, The Poltergeist, what a great song. Dreams, what a great fucking song. There's just a lot of feeling. And again, this is, I think, the first album where he records in, this is Dallas Sound Lab, which he moved to Texas, started exploring his NASCAR passion, and started recording Dallas Sound Lab and then Nomad Studios as well. But this still has a good organic sound to it. The drums are a little punchy, a little dry, but I really like this album a lot. The songs on it are really strong. It still has the old feel. I don't need a whole album concept. If there's one-off songs, I'm fine with that. I really am. I don't need to. For me, it's about the songs and how the vocal harmonies interplay with the music more so than what's being said. But Poltergeist, Dreams, Moonlight, I mean, these are all great songs. Really stand out really strong in his whole catalog. Good album. Great album, actually.
I feel like I'm going to make people mad for this next one. We'll see.
Well, yeah, before we go, I mean, we're 7 albums in or so, and in case everyone at home who's not keeping score, we've got 5 albums left,
5 more.
and
Yep.
we all have the same 5 albums left to talk about. And it really just hammers home the point we've all 3 made this evening. His catalog is very, very front heavy in terms of the chronology. The early stuff is really on another level to everything that came through the 90s and thereafter. So, Melanie, which album do you hate the most?
It's not Fatal Portrait. Don't worry.
We have problems.
All right, number 5 is The Eye. Ironically enough, first album I ever bought by King Diamond. I actually have several variants of this. Every time they repress it, I buy it because again, the 5 albums are his best that we're about to talk about. What I absolutely love about this album, and I think this is Andy LaRocque's, I think this is one of his favorite albums that they ever did. I'm trying to think about it.
Someone stated in the comments earlier that the Spider's Lullabye was his favorite.
Yeah, he mentioned this. He mentioned in an interview last year on some YouTube stream that he did that he feels it's very underrated and people should give it more of a chance. He really enjoyed recording it. So, but for this one, he mentions this is one of the favorite ones that he's done. It's obviously one of the more successful ones. And for me, I love the more subtle, not so subtle proggy elements to this album. There's quite a bit of prog on this album, especially in the song Insanity. There's a very towards the end of that song, there's a little bit of a prog element. It's got a little bit more of the keyboards that you start to hear stand out, a little bit more of the synthy sounding keyboards in there. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I think that's what I absolutely love about it. For me, this was tough because I listened to this still quite a bit, but it was hard to rank it above the next 4 that I'm about to talk about. But again, it's a masterpiece within the first 5 albums that have been released. I have one criticism is I am not a big fan of the album cover. And the theme of this is it's through the protagonist's eye, which is the different take from previous albums that were put out. I do love that it's purple. I mean, there's obviously that. I'm not a big fan of the album cover. I guess it's not as horrible as other ones that we've talked about, but and the song Father Picard, it just ends. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. It just cuts off, and that has always just driven me nuts. It fades out and cuts off. It's still going. And I don't know what that was about. If that was maybe a recording thing that they decided on, try not to drag out the song too much. I don't know, but that always really drove me a little bit crazy. That's probably the only main criticism that I have is the album cover. And then that one song does that subtle end fade out that I don't get. But again, still a masterpiece for me. And it was hard to rank it at 5. All these albums are hard now that we're getting into. So also, I mean, this is a repress, but I think that should have been the album cover.
That should have been the album. Totally should have been the album cover. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, again, great album though.
Oh, it is fantastic. Alan.
Okay, Melanie and I finally have to get in separate lanes here because I'm not going to talk about The Eye yet. We're into the first 5 albums. I've got Conspiracy ranked at this point. And this is an album that's it has an extremely strong point for me and an extremely weak point for me. So the strong point is the musicianship. It's great performances throughout the album. Cannot fault anything going on there, really. If I want to just put King Diamond music on in the background and just kind of listen to them rip, this would be high on my list to choose. So yeah, for that alone, it surpasses all the others. The reason I've got it ranked at the bottom of the 5 is I remember even the first time I got this one, I'd already heard Abigail, I had already heard them. So I think this was the 3rd one in his catalog I heard. And yeah, people of course had talked up. Yeah, it's the big follow up to them. It keeps the story going and all that. It's very cool. Let's check it out. And this story was such a disappointment to me. I just never liked the way he continued this story. That then we'll talk about, but everyone knows the story. It's very the story moves along very well. It's it's got action to it. It's very driven by the supernatural and paranormal events that go on. And you get to Conspiracy, and it's the same characters and it's supposed to be the same storyline, and it really doesn't have a lot of that. Or the parts that it has, they don't play any real central part to what happens at the end of the story. That really the story is just about, well, the doctors, and his mom are going to kill him to steal his inheritance. There's that's not any supernatural wonkiness at all. There's the whole middle section of the album where he's returning to Ammon and he's making the deal with them, but that doesn't really ever play a role in what happens after that. And so it just feels, Missy shows back up as a ghost to warn him, but she gives him like the worst, most ambiguous warning ever. So it just, I remember getting to the end of that album, because I'm sitting there the first few times I'm, was hearing it, and I'm following along, with a copy of the lyrics. I literally had to photocopy the J card because I had just copied this onto a blank tape from my buddy Matt. And I get to the end of the story, I'm just like, that can't be right. I must have missed something here. And I'm reading back through, I'm just like, no, they just kill him, steal his inheritance. He brings the whole priest thing in. They didn't need that for anything. They could have just dumped the body and gone on off on their honeymoon, and there was no need to bring a priest in and pretend that he was possessed or anything. The story really fell flat for me. And for that reason, I've got to rank it lower than the albums that we're going to get to. Musically, amazing. Dynamic. Everyone's on top of their game. So great performances. The story just hit ground with a thud. So that's why I've got to put Conspiracy as number 5 here.
All right, Marty, let's
order.
I was gonna say, do you hate the album cover? Because there's a lot of criticism about the album cover.
It's not a good cover. I mean, it's a picture of King. Yay.
So, a little tidbit. This is back before he was getting sued by Gene Simmons for his face paint too. So I think that's probably why I love the album covers, because then his face paint turned into just the crosses and white all over. But yeah, people always criticize the album cover. We'll get to that when I talk about it.
Scott Tannick, Metal Dungeon. Sorry, it sounds like we shat in a few people's Wheaties cereal bowls with the Immortal thing, but it was fun. We had a good time. Opinions, man. Everybody's got different ones, right? And we're down to what? Number 5 for me.
Number 5. It's your turn.
The Eye for me. I'm with Melanie on this one, right? You were 5 on this one as well?
Yep.
I feel so bad for Snowy Shaw. He was playing live with the band for a while. He's credited as playing drums on this album, and it's not him. It's a drum machine, which in a way they produced it really well, but still the drum performance is a little sterile because of it. That's my only real complaint. I'm captivated by the story of this album. Songs like Burn. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, King Diamond by numbers, but man, it's an old school banger. Two little girls, it's so creepy with the harpsichord. 2 little girls playing in the ashes, find the necklace of the witches. So cool. There's a creepiness to this album, the songs. And again, the Salem, well, it's like a witch thing. Well, it's not. It's the church, Picard and the nuns. That's right. Very cool stuff though. I love this album. It's great. Could have been a little higher, but again, there's no crack in the top 4 for anything really. It's tough. Snowy Shaw, drums. Did not play drums on this. Drum machine. And Melanie's right. Should have been the album cover. Absolutely.
I think King refuted that and said he was playing on drum pads, which I don't know.
It's horseshit.
But yeah, I think that was just to get out of saying that. But yeah.
It's funny because a lot of these old schoolers that would use drums in the drum programming in the studio always refuted it like it was some big awful thing that they did, like a dirty little secret type of thing, which is kind of a bummer because it's a tool. It's a tool like anything else. If you mix it right, It serves its purpose. I mean, it's noticeable here. It's pretty dry. It's pretty
Yep.
low level. Snowy Shaw is a flashy drummer, and there's no flashiness on this. It's very straight ahead. Unless they said you're playing on these pads, you're only playing this basic level shit. That's kind of an insult to your good drummer, you know. But
Yep.
anyway, yeah, that was my number 5. What's your number 4, Mel? Let's see what you got.
Oh, I'm gonna make you upset, Marty. I'm sorry. My
You're
number
gonna
4
do
is
it.
Fatal Portrait. So hear me out on this.
Oops, what happened?
Technical difficulties.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're breaking up here. We have bad connection with Florida all of a sudden. What's
Don't
happening?
feel bad, Melanie. He does it to me all the time.
Obviously, classic, iconic album, must have in your collection. First album, coming off of Merciful Fate's first, King Diamond album.
It's the spiritual successor. It is the proper third Merciful Fate album. It really is.
It really is, and I think that maybe is a little bit why it's ranked a little bit lower for me. Is it has a little bit of like they're just getting their sound of what King Diamond is going to be, and then they truly just get excellent after this. So it's a very introductory, like a really introductory King Diamond for me. Obviously, first hearing King Diamond, first album, this was probably much higher at the time, but now when I go back into it, I find myself listening to the other 3 albums that I'm about to talk about more. The one thing that the only criticism I really have, and I think just for me in general, I think Andy LaRocque is probably one of my all-time favorite guitarists.
Oh, he's amazing.
And musician.
Perfect. Yep.
And he's not the main writer on this album. There's still the guys from Merciful Fate in this band. And I feel like they really
wrote a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's maybe what the element of it is. The things I love about it is that this is just like the sound and the feel is like it's a classic heavy metal album. It's got that old school sound that I absolutely love about all the classic heavy metal sounds. Obviously, it's iconic and everybody loves it. The Jonah is an amazing song, and it's one of my favorite songs in the album. Just the candles, all that, from Haunted. Like, I'm just trying to think of all the songs. Like Haunted is and then like even just like the Voices of the Past, the instrumental. Like it's a minute long song. Like there's iconic things about it, but
which I guess
in general,
King played all the guitars on that track. Actually,
yeah, and it's funny because a lot of people assume like if they're not too into King Diamond, they assume that he's just the frontman singer, but he actually writes. Yeah, he's a songwriter. He's a session musician. He writes a lot of the songs. So yeah, I mean, I know probably a lot of people are gonna disagree with me, but again, and I love the the image of him back here.
I love his hand. His hand looks like it's like a demon hoof, like starting to turn into some sort of a hoof or something. It's all contorted and cool looking. Yeah.
Like I understand the album cover. Obviously the album cover, you see that and you know right away that's King Diamond. But it's always bothered me a little bit, just a little bit, but not enough to say like it's awful. Obviously it's fantastic. One of the best metal albums to be put out ever. So,
and that's why it's your number 4.
4. Yeah. I know.
I'm just double checking that was correct. I'm just, All right, Ellen.
Yeah, Melanie are on completely different time zones now. That's okay. We stayed together there through the tough metal part of the discography. Let's see, number 4 for me. Now I'll catch up on the eye with y'all as number 4. Another one that is chock full of really good performances. The soloing is amazing, incredible. It was kind of a different take on the concept album, doing it more with witchcraft overall, and sort of looking at this the eye from the different vantage points and different people and stuff. So it was again kind of different twist on it. Thought it was well done. Performances are what really put this one over the top. And yes, no, you're right. That weird ending to Picard is one of the it's this weird hiccup in the album that you're just like, what just happened? But it's a relatively minor thing in the grand scheme of the things. It's a great album. it's not one I take out and play a lot. And again, it just is mostly a result of the top 3 albums dominate the spins that I give to King Diamond Records. But it's still a very, very strong album. It deserves all the praise it gets. For most bands will never make an album this good. So it's a great album, but it also speaks to how much I like what we've still got to cover. So the Eye, number 4, but that does not mean it's bad. It is an excellent album.
It is, absolutely. All right.
All right, Marty. Number 4.
We're going with Conspiracy. And you know, I would kind of agree with Alan. The story is kind of stretching a little bit. You can tell he's trying maybe a little too hard to connect the dots.
Yeah.
After them being such a success and kind of a cool theme and story. But again, At the Grave, Sleepless Nights, Visit from the Dead. What a great fucking song. The Wedding Dream, the lyrics are a little silly, but I like the intensity of it. Victimized is the whiny song. I'm being victimized again, type of thing. It's a really good album. Lineup is shuffling a little bit again, I think here. I'm not gonna get into that. We're not gonna start talking lineups. This really stupid album cover. I mean, this is like no ad, but we've got no budget. We got this cool border. I think the insert should have been the I think in subsequent reissues. Oh wait, I don't have it. Oh, there it is. Maybe should have been the cover. I don't know. With a little color, that could have been kind of a cool cover, but it's a good album. It's my least favorite of the top 4, but it sits right up there. Sleepless Nights alone. Great stuff. All right. Melanie, you're back.
3.
You guys are probably going to throw me off the stream now.
No, that already happened.
Yeah, well, again, we almost have the same top 3. There's not much variation here, so we're all pretty much on the same page, even if the order is different.
All right, my number 3, and this was tough because this was my favorite King Diamond album for a very long time. But it is Them. So
cancel her.
You obviously know what my top 2 are based off of this. For me, Them obviously has the iconic grandma scream that everybody quotes in there. The story we all know, only King Diamond can make a tea party evil. And I love this album to death. Don't get me wrong. I listened to it 3 times today because I do love this album to death. But I think I got a little bit of burnt out on it for me. And maybe it's because it is now such a classic where it's been quoted in movies, like it was quoted in Clerks. And maybe there's a little bit of that burnout for me with it. And again, it's hard because the top 3 for me. But yeah, it's a great album. I love the concept of it. I love, the grandma comes out of the mental asylum, the tea party, all that stuff, the iconic songs on here. I just, Welcome Home is by far the song that people often sing for King Diamond. That's what, a lot of people love about it. And a lot of that, but again, the next 2 albums, I think for me, I just never really got truly burnt out too much. And this one, I can honestly say, like, I'm a little bit burnt out on it. That's just probably why it's my number 3. So, but also Mickey D drumming, which I feel like we have not brought up tonight. He's an amazing drummer. The guy's got 30,
yet, really, but
yeah, 30 arms. This guy,
great.
And that really is what stands out to me a lot for this album. So yeah, it's my number 3.
Awesome. Ellen.
Okay, I'm going to merge back into Melanie's lane and put them at number 3 as well. Yes, I think for at least back in the day, this was the classic King Diamond album. That when I was, first checking out the band and the folks, would talk to with metal in the mid '90s, this was the album. This was the one everybody knew, and everybody had it ranked first. Of course, there were a lot fewer albums back then. That might have been part of it, but yeah, it's an iconic story. The story is very well done. Um, Unlike my complaints about some of the later albums, this one, the story moves. There's action. There's things occurring in it. You want to see where this story is going because things are going to happen in it. The supernatural elements are worked in really well. King uses the different voices for the different little them characters very well. They really do sound fucked up and demonic and creepy as hell. It works very good. The cover painting is beautiful. It really adds, it captures, the atmosphere of, foreboding here, still having it kind of in that gothic horror context. The performances are stellar. Yes, LaRoque is on fire as usual, but I mean, really, really a standout here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned Mickey's drumming, Melanie, because absolutely a force to be reckoned with behind the kid. King's just all over the place. You can tell at this point, he's just bursting with ideas, and they're all clicking, they're all firing, it all works. The reason I've got it number 3 is it sounds like the same reason you've got it number 3, Melanie. I have heard this album enough. Yeah, it's a great album. I obviously like it quite a bit, or it wouldn't be this high. But I don't need to hear them very often anymore because I've heard it an awful lot over the years. So it's not one I feel the need to go back and play over and over and over. Some albums you just hear enough of, even though it's a great album and you love it. I have this very similar relationship with Master of Puppets. It's a Master of Puppets, not Puppet Master. There's an important difference there. Sorry, Nikki. It's just another one of those albums. I heard it so much back in the day that I rarely need to play that album. I just don't feel like, even today, it's like I was burned out. I played that album a ton by 1992 or 1993. It's 30 years later, and I still don't feel the need to revisit it much. And them is kind of, in that same bin. My last personal trivia note with them is I used to, once upon a time, I had an original picture disc press of this with the insert, autographed by Mickey D, which I no longer have. But before anybody, flames me too hard for getting rid of that, it went to a good cause because it's a little tiny piece of the engagement ring that I got for my wife.
That's worth it.
Those things don't come cheap. Some stuff had to be sold.
Well, wait a minute.
That was one of them.
Let me take that back. You're talking crazy talk right now. No, I'm kidding.
My wife may be in the chat somewhere, so you can take it up with her there.
She knows I'm kidding. I kid.
So yeah, I've got to put them at number 3. Marty, what are you going to put at number 3?
Bam, them. And unlike the Deceiver, Professor Steele, I could put this on right now and air guitar to every second of it and have a great fucking time. In fact, after this stream, I just might do that. This album to me is a classic. It is a band that's been playing live for a while together. They're on fire. The songs have more energy in them. Mickey D is a force to be reckoned with. He hits every cymbal every time, multiple times. And, everybody talks about Graham, the classic Grandma. For me, it's the Welcome Home riff, the top 20 best metal riff ever. So good. Such a great riff. And there isn't a bad song on here. And even the little interludes, it's so cool. It's just such a well-paced album. The intensity is good. King is at the top of his register, on fire, being hurled at the listener by well written, kind of proggy in nature. Some really proggy musical moments on here, and a lot of double bass. There's maybe a little Euro power metal seeping in here. Maybe Mickey D brings a little of that Euro power metal to this album, gives it a good dynamic, a little bit of ferocity. And why is Alan up here? I'm obviously the whatever shitty drink I'm drinking is kicking in, but love this album. I love this album. There's only one reason why it's not number 2, and we'll get to that here in a second.
Okay. Something you brought up there, Marty, and we haven't touched on this at all, but this is as good a time to bring up as any. You mentioned, like, yeah, maybe there's some European power metal creeping in there, but King Diamond is one of those bands that somehow always seems to transcend genre.
He does. He's King Diamond. Yeah.
And we're heavy metal fans. We hear a band or see an album, the first thing we want to do is put it into a subcategory of an infracategory of a supracategory of a genre. And King Diamond doesn't. When you ask King Diamond, what does it sound like? It's heavy metal, and that's it.
Yep.
Yes, you can hear thrashy elements on some albums. You can hear some power metal, some classic 80s metal stylings. Like Melanie said, there's Iron Maidenisms in it. But nobody sits and really obsesses over that with King Diamond. Nobody's sitting there saying, oh, this was his, foray into, Power Speed, or this is the Doom album. It's just like, no, it's a King Diamond album.
Yep.
And again, I think he's really stuck to his formula over time. He didn't try to change with, the currents and what was popular and stuff. And as such, yeah, it's one of the things that always strikes me is that if you had to divide your whole collection up, into genres and stuff, King Diamond would just sit there in the middle, and you wouldn't put it anywhere, which is just kind of a cool testament to, his whole catalog and how he stayed true to his sound.
I do want to say before we jump off this thing, sometimes I keep the records I get at stores in the original slip cases they come in for these special reasons. Back in the the 90s, people didn't give a shit about vinyl. Now you almost have to decide which organ you're going to get rid of if you want to buy a certain pressing. Now this is an OG pressing of them, and look at the price tag.
Oh my God.
I was in a little shop here in Traverse City, Michigan, that was New Moon Records. It was owned by Bob Seger's road manager, Mike, and his wife, Teresa. And every time someone would get born again, they would bring their vinyl collection in, sell it. And I had a friend that worked there. It was in a band of mine I was in back in the day. He'd call me. He's like, yeah, some guy just sold his metal collection. Come get them. And I go down and Teresa be like, oh, honey, this is $1.99 on all that stuff. I'd be like, okay, it's mint shape.
Yep.
I wish those days would come back. Return to the sane asylum. Shall we return to the sane asylum? That would be nice.
Yeah. When you could find it, and vinyl in the mid 90s, people would almost just give it to you just to take it out of the shop.
It made it so fun to dig. If you found one thing, you were going to find other things, and you didn't have to. You could go home with 4 or 5 records.
Oh yeah,
and not be fucked.
Yeah. May I interject just a short story along that line? I don't want to sideline us too bad, but yeah, I went into a record store in Texas. This would have been around 96. And, started, poking around. Just a pretty normal looking, record store. They had a lot of, CD racks, of course, all over the place. But they did have, vinyl on like they had like, the shelf you'd look through, and underneath it, they had like the cabinet doors open, and they had all this old vinyl. And so, of course, I've been down and flipped through a few, and it's like, John Travolta, Christmas album, Pat Boone album, the Medieval Kills album. 4 hours later.
Yeah, you find one, you're committed. I don't care if I'm committed.
4 hours later, I go up to the counter with a stack of about somewhere around 4 dozen heavy metal albums. And you can tell the person behind the counter just was looking, just like, okay, so you did find a lot of stuff, because I've been in the place half the damn day at that point.
Yeah.
And just like, I'd like these, please. And they're just like, somebody's actually buying vinyl. What the hell?
This guy is crazy.
And
Yeah.
they were like $1 a piece. There was one that I found. It was a sealed copy of Candlemass's Ancient Dreams that had a $10 price sticker on it. And I actually was like, could I just have this one for $1 too? You know, is there any reason it's like so much more than the others? And there's like, oh yeah, you can, yeah, just $1, yeah, sure, just add up. It was like $56 for the pile. I'm just like, I want to push my luck one more time. Can I just give you $50 and take the whole pile off your hands? They're just like, and they were literally like, yes, with their hands out, just giving me their money.
Yep.
So yeah, that was a thing you could do in the mid-90s, because vinyl, you could not give it away to most folks.
Just I have to note here that Zoller's got Puppet Master at number 5 in his list. That's a tall order, my friend. Tall order.
Yeah,
the Eye at number 1. Hey there. Hey now.
I've seen other people do that.
It's a good album.
There again. Yeah, a lot of folks in the chat had Puppet Master ranked very high, much higher than any of us did. But yeah, I'm glad. That's cool that people dig that album. That's nice to see. All right. Sorry to sidetrack there with a little.
Yeah, we got off the rails there. Sorry. Hey, how you doing, Melanie? You're back.
All right, number 2 is Conspiracy for me. So, at one point, this may have been my number 1. And again, I think with them and Conspiracy being connected story-wise, I may have got a little bit burnt out on this, but I will say Sleepless Nights is one of my all-time favorite King Diamond songs. And that alone is why it's ranked so high. I also really, really love, just in general, the overall sound of it. Mickey D's a session drummer on this album, because he then leaves the band after this to go be a pop artist. Which I think they were
getting picked up by Motorhead.
Yeah, I think that was like I don't remember the band name, but I think they were actually kind of successful too. So, but yeah, I don't know. And I'm probably the one and only person that absolutely loves the album cover. And maybe it's just because it's just King Diamond in all his glory right there. And I have the picture disc and it's framed in my room, and it freaks the shit out of my kids when they come in here and they see it. But yeah,
that's the tamest. That is easily the tamest thing in your record collection. If you start getting into that brutal shit, there's some stuff the kids don't need to see for a while.
Yeah, I mean, Cannibal Corpse alone it has some
Tomb of the Mutilated. Yeah, that's
yeah. I mean, even the newest one, they had that alternate cover that was pretty awful. But yeah. I don't know. I have a personal connection with this. This is one of the first ones I ever heard. Again, Sleepless Nights was one of those ones that you heard on the radio whenever it was played. It's often the first song that he would play live. Trying to think of what the concert was that I watched where it's like the first song they played. Yeah, I just love it. The Wedding Dream is one of my favorite songs on here. I know it's a little bit more of the goofy, hokey one, but it's longer. It's a 6-minute song that I never got enough of. One of the longer songs that King Diamond does within his discography. So yeah, number 2, absolutely love this album.
Right
probably would have been my number 1 if my number 1 wasn't my number 1.
All right, Alan.
Okay, number 2 for me. This is it's time for Fatal Portrait.
God, hold on. Oops. Oop. Oh, hey, Alan. How's it going?
Melanie and I have you outnumbered at number 1. I think it was already clear on how the score is going to end up.
Wrong.
But no, his second best album. This is when I first heard it. It took a little while to grow on me, just because again I had heard basically all the other classic albums before this one. I think this was the last of the early King Diamond catalog I ever came across, and just took a little while. To get used to it, but it's one I go back to pretty regularly, and still enjoy. The track for me, y'all, when you mentioned it in both your rankings, you mentioned plenty of great tracks, but the cut you forgot to mention, which is probably my favorite standalone King Diamond song ever, "Dressed in White."
Great song,
such a great track, so catchy. Really energetic, flows so incredibly well, and just the things he does with his voice in it, just amazing. Love that track to death. I would own that album if just for that song, even if there was nothing else on it that I liked. But yeah, great album. A lot of folks and some folks in the chat have mentioned that, it feels kind of like the, third Merciful Fate album that never got to be made. And in a way it does, but in a way it also doesn't. King was careful here to start to differentiate himself from the Merciful Fate legacy, if nothing else, in terms of content. That the Merciful Fate material had focused on the much more overtly satanic track, which is why it's considered first wave of black metal. This album doesn't do that. There's still plenty of evil vibes, but again, he's already cultivating that gothic horror take on evil stuff with the mini story of the few songs that fit together about the portrait, with the child in the attic. So it obviously is going to feel like a Merciful Fate album. He's 3/5 of the band is Merciful Fate, but he was being careful to make sure that there was going to be a distinction, that it wasn't just going to be, well, gee, why wasn't this a Merciful Fate album? That he wanted to give it its own flavor. He had another direction in mind, and he was steering it that way. So yeah, the comparisons to Merciful Fate are inevitable, but it's not just a flat copy and paste of anything from Merciful Fate. King wanted this to be different. He wanted to put his own mark on it, and he did so quite successfully. He, of course, took the concept and ran with it over the ensuing albums. But even here, he's already making sure this has a unique stamp. Great set of tracks. Melanie mentioned the Jonah. Yep, classic track there. I mentioned Dressed in White. I can play that song on repeat and never get tired of it. So Fatal Portrait for me, strong number 2. All right, Marty, you got 2 left. Which one's up?
The only reason why them wasn't in number 2 is because in this album, Abigail, the last song, The Black Horseman, the crescendo of the song is a dual guitar line that ends the song just before the end of the song. It is so powerful, so amazing. It sells this. This album is amazing, but that dual guitar line alone, just that one moment at the end of the very end of the last 30 seconds of this song, what a great, triumphant, majestic ending. Michael Denner and Hank Sherman are like the guitar duo for me. They've always been, they complete each other in a lot of ways. A lot of these, guys that are lead guys from the 70s, they work together really well. You got Downing and Tipton and, Murray and Smith. They all work together quite well, but there was the way that Denner and Sherman interlocked their rhythms, their leads, the way they traded back and forth, they completed each other. And Sherman isn't involved in this. He went on to start a glam band called Fate that was pretty crappy. And you got in Andy LaRocque, who is amazing. He was the shredder that Sherman isn't. Not saying that Sherman is a bad guitar player. I'm just saying that LaRocque is a shredder. And he was another great duo with Denner. And, you got Tim Hansen, who's from Merciful Fate as well. There's a lot of great weapons on this album. The songs are amazing. The story is really interesting. Family Ghost, that was the single off here. Omens is a great song. Abigail, kind of silly harmonies here and there, but it works so well. It makes it kind of it's a very anxious sounding song. But The Black Horseman for me put this in number 2. It's an amazing song, amazing album, classic. But let's get into this too. Family Ghost in Shrine. Shrine was not on the album. It was the B-side. Very, very cool song. Very cool single. Okay. Number 1s.
All right. Number 1, obviously Abigail. And I feel like it's very cliche to have this as number 1, but I don't care. A lot of the same things you said, Marty. Andy LaRocque, amazing addition. Shredder onto this. Black Horseman is one of my all-time favorite King Diamond albums. It still gives me goosebumps to this day. I just love that song. I spun this twice today. Still absolutely love it. I love the album cover is one of my all-time favorite album covers on here. And just it's it's an iconic song, iconic album just in general. Abigail, obviously I feel like that's one of those songs that people probably know the most just because of Abigail, like people know that. But for me, like one of the songs that really stands out a lot is the 7th Day of July, which as you guys know, that's when the illegitimate child comes into play.
Yep.
And this is the first theme album. This is the really what for me makes King Diamond, and what makes him simply one of the greatest. So it's hard not to place this as number one. I think pretty much you touched on so many other things, and I'm sure Alan will probably touch on way a lot more than I did. But yeah, and to the point of I love it. Like I said, I bought the graphic novel. You can also buy The Horseman for like $500 on King Diamond's website. It's like a replica statue thing.
Oh, does he come to your house and give you a massage?
No, it's like a
sign
platinum,
me up.
It's like a platinum bundle with the graphic novel where you get like all these extras, and then you get like a statue replica of this. I don't. It's not very big, but it's like $500, and that would probably be a drunk buy if I were ever to get really drunk and throw this on and be like, I just need that. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things about this album that are just in pop culture now. It's been in video games. Trying to think what the video game is. Final Fight. It was in Final Fight video game. Like there's snippets of there, like Capcom put it in there. It's just it's the iconic King Diamond album. It's still to this day what everybody talks about. So I just feel like it sits at number one, and it probably always will. For me anyway.
Rick.
What is Rick doing now?
All right, Ellen, you're up.
All right. Well, yep. Abigail's the only one left. Must be number one. And y'all have covered it quite thoroughly. It's outstanding performances across the board. It's my favorite King Diamond story, and in some ways I'd argue it is the best King Diamond story. I think it's hard to find one that's better. It checks off all the boxes. Maybe there's a bias because it's his first one, but he does it all so very well here. And again, as we've talked, there's some albums that came later on that go back to this well quite a bit, which speaks to how strong it was the first time out. But even King and the talented musicians he has himself surrounded with most of the time, even they never really could quite duplicate all the magic that went into Abigail. Just the moodiness of the album, it has all the gothic lore, but it doesn't just sit there on a shelf. The story is moving along, it's interesting, it's creepy. And there's also some little ambiguities about what happens in the story, that it's not just laid out start to finish and very clear cut. Back as especially in the mid 90s, where you didn't always have access to a lyric sheet, and you couldn't just look it up online, because you couldn't look anything up online. People would sit and kind of try to pick apart the parts of the story, because King's vocals are not easy to understand if you don't have the words with you all the time. And so people would sit around and debate this album. So it's like, well, wait, which part of the story is in this album, and can you make out what's happening in this verse, because I just can't figure out what he's wailing about. What are these? I'm missing 3 words, and it's messing up the story. So it really was like the ghost story that got retold around the campfire, with people picking it apart and giving it their own spin. The cover art, yes, is great. It's everything. It's the quintessential King Diamond album, and as Melanie said, it's my favorite. It's been my favorite for a long time, and it's hard to see anything ever surpassing it. It's just one of those albums. It really shows, and that was a good point, Melanie, too. It's the blueprint for how to do a really good concept / story based album, that it does everything that needs to do to keep the audience engaged and also just blow you away with the musicianship. Gotta go with Abigail number one, no doubts.
By the way, Scott, I sold my Fulci exhumed information. I sold that record. I did do that. He's asking me about in one of my collection updates. I talked about how I just did not like that album.
I recently came across a Fulci CD. I don't remember which one it is. I don't know. All right. I agree with both of your number ones. Is really good album, and Alan says it's hard to see what would surpass it. I mean, what could surpass it? I don't know. This album, of course, is the surpass.
No, it's 2-1, and it doesn't.
I get what you're all saying, and this to me, whereas King, he did a great job at avoiding the blatant satanic tones of Merciful Fate. Spiritually, atmospherically, and feel, this is the spiritual successor to this is Merciful Fate's third album, as far as I'm concerned. He wrote a lot of this material for it. And you listen to Lurking in the Dark, the beginning, the before the wolf howl. It sounds like that riff sounds like demons laughing, which is the same type of shit that Denner and Sherman used to do in Merciful Fate. There'd be riffs that sound like demons laughing to me. And that song ties it in really well. Then the wolf howl over it. It puts me in a mental sphere that is not on this planet. And I love that. And there's an aggression to this album. There's a darkness to this album. The stories are really cool. I mean, Halloween is a little played out. That's kind of been the hit off this album. Every Halloween that comes around, you have to, but I still like the song. It's great. Haunted. What a great closing to this album. Really dark, mystical sound. I love this record. It's, again, another one of those that I could never get tired of. I've listened to this, Abigail and them probably a million times easily. My teenage years. This is Fatal Portraits 86. What am I? I'm still in junior high. It's crazy. And that this album hit me like a brick truck, man. It was just listen to it a million times. I just can't get over it. And I will say the most money I've ever spent for any record on eBay, and it was at the early days of eBay. It ended a 13-year search. The Lake picture disc. The Lake was an amazing song that was not on the vinyl, so you had to get the 12-inch. And of course, it ended up coming out on the CD as a bonus track. But what a great fucking song! Cool story, and of course, it all started in '85 after Merciful Fate disbanded with No Presents for Christmas. This is the first King Diamond official release. They got the US and the European version. I can't remember which one is the blander one. I think the US one had the cover. I think this is the US version, to be honest. I could be wrong here. But, and of course, this is just No Presents for Christmas. There's no other song on here. But classics, great stuff.
I would say King Diamond's probably the only picture discs that I have in my collection in general. And I'm really, really jealous of the one that you just showed, because that is insanely expensive right now.
Well, I paid $50 for this on eBay back in the 90s.
It goes a lot more than that.
So I'm sure it goes for a lot more than that, but
yeah,
it was one of the pieces I always wanted for,
Yep. Yeah. I remember I had that back in the day and offered to trade it to you a couple of times, and we never could work out a deal for it. So I eventually ended up selling it on eBay.
Probably was trying to give you a bunch of garbage.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, dude, I got some Biohazard CDs. You want those? Like, fuck you.
I
did end up selling it. It was another piece of the engagement ring. So, sweetie, if you're still awake back there and watching this, I gave up some good shit to marry you. Just saying. I must love you an awful lot.
You got a lot more
Diamond vinyl picture discs to get you that ring.
You got a lot better shit having married her, though. That you got rid of some good shit to get better shit, right?
Absolutely.
I will say I'm surprised nobody mentioned the iconic Crossbone microphone and how it was legitimate bones.
Yeah.
And carried that over from Merciful Fate with the Melissa skull. Actually, have
Oh,
that.
look at this! Look at this! Love you too.
Aw.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
she's still right back there.
All right.
Hmm.
That's right. Y'all so sweet. Agreed.
This probably has ruined me though, so anybody that watches me for the death metal stuff, it might be a while before I come back saying how much I love a death metal album, because I think the last 12 hours I've just only listened to King Diamond, and this might not stop for a while.
So, Melanie, there was a few people in the chat was asking if we could do a part 2 of and
Merciful
cover the
Fate?
Merciful Fate. Would you be down to join us
For
again
sure.
and cover
Yeah.
Merciful Fate? Are you down with that,
Yeah.
Alan?
Yep, absolutely. That'd be awesome. Yeah, I saw that comment earlier on too. I was like, that's a good idea. I don't know about next week, but we could set that up in the not too distant future, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jurgen also asked, what do you think of Merciful Fate coming back without Denner? I think it's kind of shitty.
Mm.
It's a shitty thing, to be honest. It's just King and Hank at that point. Timmy died, and Kim Ruz, the drummer, is not, I don't think, going to be a part of it at all. So
Yeah.
There
Are
is
they at least going to have 2 guitarists, or is it just going to they
got to
gonna
have 2 guitarists. They got to have. It's like
Judas Priest says you don't.
Well, they do now. They got schooled real quick on that.
Did they finally announce they were going to do a second one?
Yeah, Andy Sneap is back. Andy Sneap is back in.
Oh, okay. I as bad as the whiplash to that was, I figured they were going to have to cave. I hadn't heard officially that they did. So, okay. Hey, at least they were smart enough to own up to the mistake and fix it.
Right on. But Melanie, it's been a pleasure having you on the stream with us. Thanks for hanging with us. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
We're going to get you back again soon, and don't hang up afterwards. We're going to chat after we get off the live thing here. But at one point I saw like 86 people watching, which might be a record. Thank you everybody for.
Yep.
Oh wow.
Jurgen says Mike Weed is in now.
Oh, good. Another Mike Weed project.
Oh, no.
I'm sure he's a wonderful human being, and he's a good guitar player. I just don't like his style. It's just me.
King Diamond is one of the greatest songwriters ever. So much great material. Agreed, Craig. Agreed.
100%. Yep.
It was a lot of fun, and thanks again, Melanie, for joining us. Hey, and
Yeah.
everybody, if you are not subscribed to Melanie Loves Death Metal, go over there and subscribe to her channel. And you know what? There's going to be some days she doesn't talk about death metal, and that's fine. Don't give her shit about it, because that's dumb. It's her channel. She can do whatever the fuck she wants. If she wants to talk about power metal one day, great. If not, she's going to go crazy listen to this cavernous stuff that all sounds exactly the same.
It's coming. There will be a power metal episode. It'll feature the new Halloween album, which I'm sure you guys.
What's that? Is that
Halloween made an album recently?
they have a new one?
Do I sleep? I sleep great. Actually, sometimes I fall asleep with my AirPods in, listening to death metal. It's amazing.
Right on.
Yeah, definitely referring to. Yeah, I mean, you put out a ton of content. There's always something new to check out on Melanie's channel. So go start checking it out if you haven't already. I'm betting most of you have, but if it somehow missed your radar, you got all weekend to start filling your ears with some cool content over on her channel.
I love the unboxing. It's you can almost hear her bank account crying over the music that's playing in the background. She's opening all these boxes. I'm like, oh shit, I need to go check that out. And of course, they're already sold out already. I'm like, fuck. My finger is so not on the pulse. I'm always so late on the new death metal stuff for sure.
People love unboxings.
I don't get it. I don't get it.
I filmed one last night, and it's the same. It's like, I'm not sure why people want to see me take brown paper out of a cardboard box, but here you go, because it's fun though.
What's in it? I don't know. What's in it? But anyway, thank you everybody for hanging out with us. We might be back Wednesday. I don't know for sure. Friday for sure. We'll get Melanie back again soon, and we will cover the Merciful Fate catalog, which is
for sure
also very fun and probably going to roll very similar to the way the King Diamond one went, but we'll see how it all pans out. And anybody have anything to add before we jump?
Nope. Thanks everybody for watching, and have a great weekend. Thanks again, Melanie, for showing up. We love it.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Later, Balin.